Crown season 1, episode 3, show title Windsor. This episode is really about the funeral of Queen Elizabeth's father, but that's the sort of outward facing views. That's what the public is seeing. Privately, what you see is a whole different world. Okay, so Queen Elizabeth's father was never supposed to be king. His older brother was. His older brother abdicated, said, nope, not going to be me. I want to go get married to this woman who's divorced, and they won't let me do that if I'm king. So screw you guys, I'm out. And when his brother passed away, nobody wanted him at the funeral. I mean, like nobody wanted him there, and certainly they didn't want his wife there. And he took offense to that. But yeah, he was allowed to come to the funeral, but he was not treated as a former king, which he felt he should have been, even though I see the argument. But the thing about this episode that really stuck in my head was you could just see how much blame he took for the younger brother passing away. They especially the mother, her Queen Elizabeth's grandmother, felt it was Mary Queen of Scots, felt that the older brother really killed the younger one by putting the stresses of the office on him, because the older one had been raised to be king. He'd been trained for this, and the younger one really hadn't. Right. So he was thrust in the office. He wasn't ready for it. He wasn't expecting it. He didn't see it coming. He's like, boom, you're king. And it takes a toll on a person. And the other thing that's going on in this episode, besides the family really not being happy with the former king, who really just spends half the episode trying to figure out how to get his yearly allowance raised because the family sends him money. He doesn't have any way to make a living. The other thing that goes on in this episode is sort of a challenge for the future queen, or queen. She hadn't really had a coronation yet, but Queen Elizabeth, and her family, because there's a lot of pressure for her to, she'd gotten married to Philip, whose last name was Mountbatten, and this is the 1950s, right? So this is not like, there's not really hyphenated names. When you get married, do you take your husband's name? Do you not take your husband's name? That's a relatively new thing. It wasn't really a thing then, especially for the royal family. I mean, that's not really something they would even do today, I would think. But now there's pressure for her to say, okay, all of our names are going to change from Mountbatten over to Windsor. And how's her husband going to deal with that, right? He's very supportive of his wife. He's very supportive of the queen, and he's kind of doing everything he can, but he kind of just wants to keep his name and his kids' names. And I see both sides of it, right? I get it. It's important to send on that family heritage, but at the same time, it's important to send on that family heritage. So, I get both sides of this fight, and I get why there'd be strife. The other thing that's really kind of going on, and I didn't really think about this before, is that they had just kind of renovated a home that they were living in and enjoying. And now, hey, your father passed away. Great. That's cool for you. Kids are happy. Kids are living there. Kids are kind of out of the limelight because you're not living in, the middle of London. But hey, the whole family's going to move over to Buckingham Palace, where you're under the microscope kind of 24/7. And there was some discussion about, hey, we're going to stay in our home. And well, the Queen Elizabeth and Philip lost that fight, right? So they wound up living in Buckingham Palace, and they weren't really necessarily all that happy about it. They wanted to use that for business purposes, and they wanted to live somewhere else. And kind of get that, right? Security reasons, it's a lot easier to have her at Buckingham Palace because it's a fortress, basically. But I see why that would be a struggle for a lot of people. But the one thing that really, really, really kind of was an overtone in this episode was just how much hatred some of the royal family had for her uncle who abdicated, right? Nobody liked the guy. He was supposed to be king, and they felt he turned his back on the country. They felt he should have said, nope, I'm not going to marry this divorced woman. I'm going to go ahead and stay king because that's what's for the good of the country. And what does that say about a family where they're like, we know you love her and that's cool and all, but tough shit, man. It's too bad because you're the king. Fuck off. You can't. Yeah. It's an interesting position to consider from the former king, her uncle's position, but could the family have been more tolerant? Certainly today, I think that would be fine. but back then it wasn't even an option. And that again brings up another question about the royal family and any kind of these legacy families. We in the United States, Bush family had two presidents, father, son. Do we have to have these legacy families, or can we just find the right person for the job? And I think in the 1800s, 1700s, early 1900s, 19 through 1980, 1990, it wasn't quite as obvious just how stage managed the public perception of the royal family was. And that gave them a lot of power because it kind of held them as mysterious. And that power, whether it's real or perceived, perceived power is the same as real power. But in the information age, we kind of know these people for who they are, right? I'm pretty sure we all know who Prince Harry is at this point. Prince William, right? King George. We know a lot about King George because of all the Princess Di stuff, which is in the show. Just later seasons, we'll get to it. But I think modern day, we start asking ourselves these questions of: is it really worth it? Do we really need royalty anymore, or can we just have it as this neat little thing on the side where it's sort of like, yeah, you guys are rich and you're the royal family for what it's worth, but that's really it, right? We're kind of done now. And I don't know. Maybe it's worth keeping the tradition alive. Maybe it's not. Love to hear your comments on it. Comment below. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep going through this one episode by episode. One thing, the other thing that I think is still an overtone and shows up in every episode so far in the show is that her husband, Philip, is a guy who doesn't like to sit still. He's a guy who was a naval officer. He's active. He likes to hunt. He likes to get out and do stuff, and he can't because his job now is to support his wife, the Queen, and he still has stuff he wants to do. He doesn't want to just go stand in the background and get his picture taken, right? So this is 1952 when her father passed away. Airplanes were still new, right? I mean, these were not like 200-year-old things. They were still kind of new. Open cockpits, biplanes were all the rage. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm going to go learn how to fly. Well, so he kind of stops the naval stuff and goes back and learns how to fly. And I think the show gets into that in the coming seasons, but I can see, or coming episodes, but I can see where that would be a question mark for people. Hey, Queen's husband wants to go learn how to fly these dangerous rickety aircraft that crash sometimes and people get killed in them all the time. Is that a good idea, or should we stop him? Well, it's something he wants to do. So should we get Parliament involved in the decision-making process to see if he's allowed to do it, or should we just let him do it? And she kind of was like, yeah, just go do your thing. And I've seen the show before, so I can tell you that in coming episodes, it becomes a question of should we let him continue or not? And if you're gonna, I know a lot of people are saying, well, the poor royals, let me be one, right? But how much control over your life do you give up? How much control over your life do you really have, or are you just a puppet if you're in one of these positions? And I don't really want to like the idea of being a puppet. In fact, I've had many people tell me, "Oh, you should be more like this. You should be more like that. You're a physicist. You need to act like this." Well, first off, fuck you. I'm the one that's a physicist, not you. And if you don't like it, I'll do what I want anyway because it's sort of who I am. Nobody likes being a puppet. And it kind of goes to extreme when you get into one of these higher end positions. But I think the show really does kind of do a great job of bringing that out. And I kind of, so far, there hasn't been a bad episode. I'm trying to watch it again to make sure that my memory of it is correct. But it so far, every episode is just on point, well acted, well directed, and well executed. Although, since she is married to Philip, and Philip is played by the same actor who was once Doctor Who, I do keep waiting for a TARDIS to show up. I haven't seen one, but I'm on the lookout. Everybody have a great weekend.